Ferrari were cleared, but the paddock did not calm down. It got louder. Because this was not just a strange tire test at Imola. It was a warning sign. A floor change, a written complaint, rival teams demanding answers, and then a decision from the governing body that left almost everyone asking the same dangerous question. What did Ferrari really learn, and why was nobody given the full explanation? The shocking part is not that Ferrari found a clever way to work inside the rules. Formula One teams do that every week. The shocking part is that this happened in a season where the governing body had already admitted a major timing failure at Monaco, where penalties were being questioned, trust was collapsing, and teams were starting to believe the rulebook only mattered when someone was forced to explain it. So now, the Ferrari tire test has become something much bigger. Not just a technical dispute. Not just a complaint. A test of whether Formula One still has one clear standard for everyone. And by the end, the real problem is not going to be Ferrari's floor. It is going to be what the governing body failed to do after everyone noticed it. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why the anger exploded so quickly, you have to understand what a Pirelli tire test is supposed to be. Because from the outside, it sounds harmless. A team puts a car on track. A driver runs laps. Engineers collect information. Pirelli studies how the tire behaves. Everyone goes home. But in Formula One, nothing is ever that simple. A tire test is one of the rare moments when a modern Formula One car is allowed to run outside a normal race weekend. And that makes it valuable. Extremely valuable. Because real track running gives teams something they cannot fully recreate in a simulator, or in a wind tunnel, or on a computer screen. It gives them reality. Real asphalt. Real heat. Real tire wear. Real airflow. Real driver feedback. Real moments where the car either works, or it does not. And that is exactly why the rules around these tests are so strict. The test is supposed to be about the tires, not about the car. That sounds obvious, but it is the entire heart of the controversy. Imagine a teacher allowing every student to try the same new running shoes, just to see how the shoes perform. The teacher says, do not change anything else. Same track. Same distance. Same conditions. Just test the shoes. Then one student quietly changes the surface under their feet. Now the result is different. Maybe the shoes are better. Maybe the track is better. Maybe the athlete is better. Nobody can tell anymore, because the test has been polluted. That is what rival teams feared when they looked at Ferrari. Because after the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, Ferrari were taking part in a tire development test at Imola, and everything should have been routine. Charles Leclerc had run in the morning. Carlos Sainz ran later. But then came the detail that changed the entire mood around the test. Sainz appeared to be using a different floor specification from the one Leclerc had used earlier in the day. And in Formula One, the floor is not just another part. The floor is where a huge amount of hidden performance lives. Most fans look at the front wing, the rear wing, the side pods, and the paint. But underneath the car, where cameras rarely focus and casual viewers rarely look, there is an entire world of performance. The floor controls how air moves under the car. It helps pull the car toward the track. It affects how stable the car feels in fast corners. It changes how the tires are loaded, how quickly they overheat, and how much confidence the driver has when pushing near the limit. So when a floor changes, the car changes. And when the car changes during a tire test, the tire data may no longer be just tire data. That is the danger. Ferrari's explanation, according to the report, was that the floor used by Sainz was an older specification, and that the change happened because the newer floor used earlier had been damaged. That explanation matters, because using an older, previously raced part is very different from secretly introducing an experimental upgrade. But rival teams were not satisfied with simply hearing that Ferrari had a reason. They wanted the governing body to show the reasoning. Which floor was damaged? Which floor replaced it? Had that replacement already been raced? Was the car still within the limits of what a tire test allows? Could Ferrari have gained useful aerodynamic information anyway? Those questions were not emotional noise. They were competitive questions. Because if Ferrari had even accidentally collected data that helped them understand the car, that could matter later. Not tomorrow. Not necessarily at the next race. But in the development race that decides which upgrades survive, which ideas get abandoned, and which team finds performance while everyone else is still guessing. That is why at least two teams put their concerns in writing. They were not just complaining for attention. They were drawing a line. They were telling the governing body, this needs to be checked, and everyone needs to understand the answer. But here is where the story begins to turn. The governing body investigated. Ferrari were asked for clarification. Discussions happened. Ferrari were cleared. And yet, the paddock did not get the kind of detailed public explanation that could have ended the matter. That missing explanation became the fuel. Because when teams do not receive clarity, they do not assume the best. Not in Formula One. Not when millions are spent chasing tiny advantages. Not when one unclear ruling can shape the behavior of every team on the grid. They start asking darker questions. If Ferrari can change a floor in a tire test and be cleared, what exactly is allowed now? If damage is the reason, how much damage is enough? If an older part is acceptable, how old does it need to be? If no public statement explains the boundary, who actually knows where the boundary is? And this is why the controversy became bigger than Ferrari. Because the real fear was not only that Ferrari may have learned something useful. The real fear was that the governing body had created uncertainty. And uncertainty in Formula One is never empty. It becomes strategy. It becomes suspicion. It becomes pressure. It becomes every rival team wondering whether they should push the same line next time, just a little harder. And this is where the Ferrari story stops being a quiet technical question and turns into a paddock conflict. Because the moment rival teams put their concerns in writing, the situation changed. It was no longer just engineers whispering in the background. It was no longer just somebody noticing a difference in photographs, or hearing something in the garage, or comparing what Leclerc had run in the morning with what signs appeared to run later in the day. A written concern forces the issue into the open. Not publicly, at least not at first, but politically. Because now the governing body had to look at Ferrari and ask for answers. And Ferrari had to explain why a different floor specification appeared during a test that was supposed to focus only on Pirelli tires. On the surface, that sounds like a simple process. Ask the question. Check the parts. Confirm the rules. Close the matter. But Formula One is not simple when trust is already damaged. And that is the key. The paddock was not reacting to Ferrari in a vacuum. The teams were reacting after months of uncertainty around decisions, penalties, and how the governing body was choosing to enforce the rules. There had already been a feeling that the season had started strangely softly. Fewer penalties. Fewer consequences. Fewer moments where the governing body stepped in with a firm hand. Some drivers and teams liked that approach. Others quietly wondered whether the pendulum had swung too far. Because in racing, freedom is good until someone believes another team is exploiting it better than everyone else. Then freedom starts to look like weakness. And that is exactly the mood Ferrari walked into. The tire test at Imola should have been boring. That is what makes this so powerful. Boring tests are supposed to create data, not drama. They are supposed to help Pirelli understand tire behavior, not make rival teams ask whether a championship contender was gathering forbidden performance clues under a legal cover. But once the floor question appeared, every detail became loaded. Why was the change made? When exactly did the damage happen? Who checked the replacement part? Was it truly an older specification? Had it already been raced in a way that made it legal for this test? And perhaps most importantly, even if the part was legal, did Ferrari gain anything useful from running it? That last question is the one that refuses to go away. Because Formula One teams do not only search for direct performance. They search for understanding. A single run can show whether a car balance improves. A driver comment can confirm whether a floor behaves more calmly on entry, or gives more confidence at speed. A comparison between the morning and the afternoon can reveal whether tire behavior changes when the car is generating load in a different way. And that matters because tires are not separate from the car. They are connected to everything. If the floor changes the way the car presses into the track, the tires feel that. If the tires feel a different load, the engineers see different temperatures, different wear, different grip, different balance. And suddenly, the tire test has given you information about the car. Maybe not enough to build an upgrade by itself, but enough to confirm a direction. Enough to remove doubt. Enough to tell a team, this path is worth following. That is why the rivals wanted more than a private answer. They wanted the governing body to make the logic public. Because there is a massive difference between Ferrari saying, it was an older floor, and the governing body explaining, this exact floor had already been used legally, the damaged part was verified, the replacement did not create forbidden development data, and here is why the test remained compliant. One version asks the paddock to trust. The other version gives the paddock a standard. And in this case, the paddock felt it got too much of the first, and not enough of the second. That is when the word transparency became so important. Because transparency is not just a public relations phrase in Formula One. It is protection. It protects the team that has been accused, because it clears them properly. It protects the rivals, because they know the boundary. It protects the governing body, because it shows that the decision was not based on pressure, reputation, or convenience. Without transparency, everybody loses something. Ferrari may be cleared, but suspicion remains. Rivals may be told the case is closed, but they still do not know what they are allowed to do. The governing body may believe it handled the process correctly, but the outside world sees another decision delivered from behind a closed door. And behind closed doors, imagination becomes dangerous. Because every team on the grid knows how much Ferrari matters to Formula One. Ferrari are not just another team. They are the sport's most historic name. Their presence carries weight. Their struggles become global stories. Their victories shake the paddock. Their controversies travel faster than almost anyone else's. So when Ferrari are investigated and cleared without a full public explanation, rival teams do not just ask technical questions. They ask political ones. Would another team have been treated the same way? Would a smaller team have been cleared so quietly? Would the governing body have published more detail if the accusation had been against someone else? Those questions are uncomfortable. But once they enter the paddock, they are hard to remove. And Ferrari, of course, would see the story differently. From their side, this may have looked like rivals trying to turn a practical repair into a scandal. A damaged floor, an older replacement, a legal test, and then a wave of suspicion because competitors did not like what they thought they saw. That is why this controversy is so sharp. Both sides can feel wronged. Rivals can feel denied the clarity they deserved. Ferrari can feel targeted for doing something they believe was legal. And the governing body is stuck in the middle, trying to control a dispute that it may have allowed to grow by not explaining enough. But this is only half the story. Because the Ferrari complaint landed just as Formula One was being forced to confront an even bigger failure, one that had nothing to do with interpretation, and everything to do with a hard technical mistake. Monaco. The one race where track position is almost sacred. The one race where a small penalty can destroy an afternoon. The one race where getting the timing right is not just important, it is everything. And when the governing body got that wrong, it changed the way every team looked at every decision that came after. That is why the Ferrari case became so combustible. Because if Monaco had never happened, maybe teams would have been angry, but the story might have faded. If the penalty system had felt consistent, maybe the Ferrari clearance would have been easier to accept. If the governing body had already built trust through clear explanations, maybe a private technical ruling would not have triggered so much suspicion. But that is not the season Formula One was living through. The season was already full of cracks. Ferrari did not create all of them. But the floor controversy exposed them. And the next crack was so serious that it made the entire paddock ask whether the system could still be trusted when the numbers themselves were wrong.